up guys, Austin here from Airsoft Station, and today we are reviewing the Inferno in-grip regulator. Now this is a very cool little gadget that can be used in just about any HPA system as long as it uses a macro line like this. So that would be the Inferno SMP, a Polar Star, even a Daytona gun. So let's jump right into it. This is my personal gun here. This is a Polar Star. It has a version 2 fusion engine in there, and I'm going to be installing it and showing you how to tune it in and to regulate the pressure inside the gun, because it's a lot different than the standard on-tank regulators. But it is very cool and it is very innovative. So there are some perks to it, and I will show you what those are. So in the packaging here, you're going to get the regulator itself, the mounting base, this little key thing here to unscrew it, as well as a macro line here. Now this is if you have the Inferno SMP. This is just sort of a heavier duty macro line, so you just simply unscrew this little end here from the Inferno, and we'll replace it with this more heavy-duty macro line so that everything, you know, stays nice and tight and fits in there. You also get a Allen key for adjusting the pressure, which we will get to later. But first thing is first, let me show you how the in-grip regulator differs from a standard on-tank regulator. So this is how my gun is set up currently. It's got your standard connection in the grip here, which I will hopefully remove for you, just like that. So this is your standard grip connection that comes out of your grip, and this is just your standard macro line coming out of my gun here. I know everything is black here, so it's hard to tell, but that is the macro line right there. And all of this just sits in my grip. This is right on my macro line, and my standard hose, which is right here, and my regulator is right here. This screws onto my tank here, which is right here. I've got it sitting over here out of frame on the table here. This would screw onto my tank. This is the regulator. You can adjust the PSI, and it's got the little pressure gauge there, so you can easily tell what your PSI is, and a hose running from there, which would just connect on just like so. So pretty simple, basic, you know, regulator to hose to gun setup. Now this in-grip regulator differs in the sense that your regulator does not go on your tank, it goes in the grip, ergo the name in-grip regulator. So this will actually mount directly to the bottom of the either gearbox if you had just like a Polar Star jack or an Inferno SMP, or in this case directly onto my fusion engine here, because the fusion engine replaces the entire gearbox. But it mounts directly through the grip using these 4 Allen screws directly on there, and the macro line goes in the top hole right there. So what this does is it gives you a more consistent regulation, because the closer your regulator is to the gun, the less of a chance there is for the line to flex and give you variation in your FPS. And as we all know, consistency is accuracy. So the more consistent your FPS is, the more you can dial in your hop up to be just right, and the straighter and the more accurate your BBs will fly without any sort of little fluctuation in height differences with it hitting the hop up at a different FPS every time. So the first thing you need to do is you kind of need to commit to doing this. Now I'm definitely probably going to pick one of these up, which is why I don't mind cutting my macro line. But the first thing you got to do is you got to mount this on there so that your macro line has approximately a 1/4 inch sticking out of the base here. So that just simply screws off here. This is the mounting base, and this is the regulator itself. So we're going to take the 4 screws out, and we're going to set them aside. We're going to slide this up over the macro line, and you'll want to cut your macro line so there's about a 1/4 inch sticking out, so right about there or so. So give me a minute to cut that, and what that does is that just sits right in the regulator like that. But right now it's obviously too long. You can't get the regulator up over the hose, if you can see that. There's just no way you could get it up over that. So give me a minute and I will cut that line. Alright, so now that's that done, I have taken off about 2 inches of macro line here, and there's just that little bit sticking out of the mounting base. It's about 1/4 of an inch, which is what Inferno recommends. So, we're going to go ahead and take that off, set this excess macro line aside, and screw our regulator back together. Now, what we want to do next is to mount this mounting base through the grip into the bottom of our gearbox or our fusion engine. Now, the way we want to do that is some grips or some gearboxes only have 2 available options. It'll be a diagonal, so you only want to use 2 of the Allen screws. And what I mean by diagonal is the holes up on your grip. I know you can't really see this, I'll have to do a close-up shot of this, but there's 4 holes in this grip, and there's 4 holes on the Polar Star. However, sometimes they only have the 2 diagonal holes. So if that's how your grip or your gearbox is set up, make sure you only put in the 2 screws in the correlating spot. Otherwise, you won't be able to screw it in, and it won't be able to tighten down. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to fast forward through this. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking this mounting base here, so that the threads are on the bottom, putting this up through here and using the included 4 screws to screw up through the mounting base, through my grip, and into my gearbox here. Alright, so just a quick note here, what I actually ended up doing is I took the regulator and the mounting base here and I screwed it all together, and that way I could use the regulator to kind of manipulate the mounting base to get those 4 screws there, because it actually was kind of difficult. So now I just let gravity help me with the work. I'll keep the grip upside down and I'll use this little key here to unscrew the regulator. And then just leave that mounting base right where it currently is. So pull the regulator out, and that will expose those four screws with the mounting base here. So line everything up here and put your grip there so that your macro line goes through the mounting base. And then we'll use an Allen key here to tighten it all down. Alright, so now that we've got that done, just for your guys' reference, that was a 3/32 Allen wrench. And I pulled the bottom one here so it's nice and long like that. And that could easily reach down in the grip to reach those four Allen screws. So, now that we've got that done, all it's time to do is make sure our grip is secure, which it is. It feels nice and solid in there. And now it's time to take our in-grip regulator along with the key here, set it down in there, and tighten it down and make sure there's a good air seal in there. But before I do that, I want to set our pressure or our PSI to a very low setting. So what the range is, and I'm going to use their included Allen wrench here, it's right there on the side. Don't mess with the flathead, smaller Allen key on the top or on the side here. Those are keeping it, structurally intact. So I would recommend that you don't mess with those at all unless you're doing some maintenance or changing an O-ring on it. All you're going to do is this deeper, slightly larger Allen key is what you're going to adjust for your PSI. Now you'll notice that there's not a PSI gauge here, so you don't know exactly at what PSI you're at. That is the downside of the in-grip regulator. However, the plus side is that you're going to have a more efficient regulation. There's going to be less fluctuation in your FPS per shot, and the reason that I'm going to end up going with it is because your regulator is mounted down, and so that macro line doesn't have ever a chance to bend because everything is mounted down. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will explain. When this is just sitting on the macro line coming out of my gun like that, so just imagine that this line here is what's attached to my air rig, or my fusion engine. As this macro line is hanging out, this attachment is on there, and then my hose comes and attaches on that. Now when it's like this, there are 3 spots that something can go wrong. There's the spot up here coming off my regulator. This can start to bend and that can start to leak air. Over here, this can bend and start to leak air from the hose to the connection, but those 2 are relatively strong connections. The one that you actually have to worry about a little bit is this one up here, the macro line to the quick detach attachment. That one, if it gets bent or it gets kinked, it will start to leak air a little bit, and I've personally had this happen on me. Just, getting, playing rough and, diving into a ditch or something like that, and it gets bent really hard. Those little tiny teeth in there aren't capable of hanging on, and it'll start to leak a little bit of air. Now, is that the end of the world? No. Is it super noisy? No. Are you gonna run out of air? No. But it's just a little bit annoying knowing that you're slowly losing air over time when it's in that kinked position. This one eliminates that. When this is mounted down like this, the mounting base is screwed directly into the top of your grip, meaning there's no room for wiggle there, and then this screws directly into that. So there's no chance for it to bend that macro line at all because it feeds directly into this and all of that is mounted down. All you have to worry about is your hose. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually screw a tank directly into the bottom of the regulator. It would look a little funny, it would look more like a paintball gun, but that would give you, independence, freedom, no hoses or anything like that. You could just get a small tank, screw it directly into the bottom of this because this is your regulator. So you wouldn't have to have an external regulator or a hose. However, I have a really big tank. I wouldn't want that, big heavy tank hanging off the bottom of my grip. Plus, it would just look really silly and unrealistic. Also sell this hose here, and I'll put the link to the description of this in our website. But this has the standard quick detachment as well, and then it has the standard threads of a paintball tank or an HPA tank to thread into the bottom of the regulator. So once that's all locked down, the only points that you have that can possibly bend are is this one quick detach, and then you've got the coil line here, and then this screws onto your tank. Now these are very solid connections here, so the only one you have to worry about, as I mentioned, is that macro line, which is up in here, and that doesn't have a chance to move. So this is going to be a perfect air seal on top of being more consistent in its regulation. So let's go ahead and install that, and I'm going to set the PSI. Now here's the little cheat sheet that you need to know, and it's easy to memorize. You don't have to look at the instruction manual every time. This regulator is capable of regulating from 40 PSI to 140 PSI. When it's tightened all the way down, righty tighty lefty loosey, righty all the way down, that is 40 PSI. And if you were to take this set screw completely out, it'd be 140 PSI. And every time you turn it, it's approximately 15 PSI difference. So if I set this on the table here and I make that Allen key point directly at me, we know because it's tightened down all the way, it's at 40 PSI. If I were to turn it out, exactly one turn, and that Allen key is pointing at me again, we know it's at about 55 PSI. And then one turn again, we know that now it's at 70 PSI. It's pointing directly at me. And again, every time you add 15, 85, 100, 115, 130, and then another like 3/4 turn, and now we know we're at 140. And that right there is going to be the max PSI. I could keep unscrewing it if I wanted, but there's not going to be any change because, it's already coming out completely and now I just removed it. So we're going to tighten it all the way back down, and just to see how it's regulating and how it acts, I'm going to tighten it all the way down to 40 because we can always take this out and change it. So there we have it. It's at 40 PSI. I'm going to use this little key here to help screw it in. So I'm going to tip the gun up and slide the regulator down in there. And as you can see, I can't really reach it, so I'll use the key here to help me tighten everything in there. So now we've got that nice and tight. I'm going to attach my quick connect here. So I'm going to screw that down into the regulator. And this is a very solid connection, I must say. That's not going anywhere, you know. How I was mentioning that that's the chance for the macro line to kink or anything, there is no chance. That's not going anywhere. So I'm going to use the coil hose here. This is not included in the package, but as I said, you can pick this up. They're very affordable. They're around $30 or so. And I'm going to screw this onto my tank. I'm going to screw this into my gun, and we're going to see how it works. Alright, so we've got all of that done now. All we need to do is connect the line and open up the tank. This will be the ultimate torture test on this regulator because I have a monstrous 98 cubic inch 4500 PSI tank freshly filled to 4500 PSI. So here we go. Let's see how it works. We'll connect here, and then I'm going to open up the tank here. You heard it pressurized there. Seems to be working well. So let's head over to the chrono, and we'll get the PSI perfectly dialed in. And I'll show you how consistent this awesome regulator is. I'm going to be using 0.3s for this chrono now. This is the only exception. Normally we chrono with 0.20s. However, for HPA systems, 0.3s are a more accurate chrono simply because the air continuously expands behind the BB, and so it can give a higher, or it's a more accurate reading with a 0.3, because with a 0.2, oftentimes that air hasn't fully expanded because the BB is moving so quickly with a 0.2 that it travels out of the barrel before that air continues to expand, and therefore if you were to use a heavier BB, it's not giving it an accurate representation with the chrono while using a 0.2. So we're going to use 0.3s for this chrono, and we're going to get this dialed in so that it's working just perfectly awesome. It's the same SPS, right? Alright, so we've got that done now. As you can see, there was just tiny little FPS variations thanks to this in-grip regulator being so close to the fusion engine. Again, just to sort of recap, this can be used with just about any HPA setup that uses the macro line. It comes included out of the box with the little macro line for your Inferno SMP. To upgrade that, each little turn of the dial, each turn of the set screw changes at about 15 FPS. So if you do one tighten down, you're going to lower it by 15 FPS. If you're going to do one turn around, loosening it back out or backing it out, that is going to increase your FPS by 15. Overall, very solid. No wiggle on this nipple here. It's just very solid. I don't have to worry about that kinking or anything like that. And these coil lines are very nice simply because they have the capability of getting very long. However, they stay nice and contracted while on your vest, so you're not going to be getting it caught in brush or shrubs or anything like that. But if you do need to extend your gun out or set it down or something like that, you have a little bit of wiggle room with this coil. They are very stiff when you get them out of the box, but after some use they do stretch out a little bit. That's about it for this review. I hope this was helpful, and leave a comment on a scale of 1 to 10, how beautiful is my rifle? It better be an 11, otherwise I'm gonna be offended. So that's about it. Until the next video, have a good one, guys.